story, that actually is a real part of my story in the sense of growing up in Portland where there were very few Asians. And amongst Asians, having a sister with a disability really sort of impacted me. It impacted me, I think, in ways I didn't know, but one of the things that it impacted me was in the Korean culture, when you're brought up and you're the eldest son, or you're the eldest sibling, you're already sort of classified as something called an oppa, which basically means older brother. And what's funny is that as siblings, and you have siblings, the siblings are sort of not able to call you by name. They're actually forced or guided by their parents to call their older siblings oppa or duna, which basically means older sister. And growing up in Oregon where, again, there were very few Asians, and my younger sister sort of having that role, there are a lot of young pictures of me as a child where there's my sister who's sort of smiling, and there's me then with like a black eye or like a ripped shirt. And what was interesting about that is I had this history where I felt sort of the need to protect. When there was people picking on my younger sister, rather than running to my parents, she'd actually run to me and say, "Oppa, I need some help." And I'd look over and be like, "You know, Angie, who do you need help from?" And she happened to always point to the biggest kid, the largest kid, and say, "Hey, this person used to pick on me." And so Oregon, I think, sort of rooted me in this notion of growing up to an older sister where I felt like I had to protect and sort of care for. And then where Oregon took me was basically to the University of Washington. That's where I started sort of my college experience. I met my wife there, and I started actually in the tech field where I started with Microsoft and then actually segued to the courts. But the last story I sort of wanted to share, and you'll find that if you get to know me, I speak in stories, is that one of the driving factors in why I've chosen a service in the public sector is a story that started many, many years ago when I was a child. In Portland, when you were growing up, or when I was growing up, there wasn't really a need. Those were the days where car seats weren't really enforced, seatbelt laws were a little bit more lax, and my sister and I would always sort of hop around behind the car seat. And I remember a day where we were just sort of going at it. My mom was screaming, she was saying, "Calm down." And we actually ended up getting pulled over. And at the time, when we were that age, her English speaking was a little bit limited. And we remember going through all sort of the issues, and then ultimately they decided to go to court. At the time, when you think back, it wasn't that big of a ticket. But because of her sort of understanding, she was worried that the government, that the courts would deem her as an unfit mother. So more than the ticket, it was her opportunity to go to court and say, "Hey, this is who I am as a mother. I'm not a bad parent. I care about the safety of my children." What's funny is if you know anything about my mom, and I'll end soon because I think I've been just, is that she's a very strong woman. And the court was the first time I sort of saw her shake and nervous. And the judge at the time sort of saw that, put her at ease, and sort of said, "Mrs. Kim, we are not here because we have any questions about who you are as a child or who you are as a parent. You're here because you actually got a ticket." And the judge really could resonate with her and really sort of explain why she was here, that we weren't questioning her parent skills. And that's always stayed with me. So it's one of the factors in terms of why I've chosen and why I'm here today, working for Marin County Superior Court.
Yeah, it's your cue.
That is Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. Thank you, and I don't like this, setting up like this. How do I follow this gentleman's lovely comments? I'll try. Thank you, Mabel, for having us here. This is fabulous to see all of you. And wasn't that drumming so beautiful, so rhythmic? And thank you. They are not here, but it was beautiful. So I have 3 minutes to condense almost 60 years of my life's journey. I'll try.
That's okay. We have 2 more questions afterwards, so you can expound there.
I'll give it a shot. So I grew up in India, and I came here when I was 35 years old. I want to ask some of you, are there first generation immigrants here who immigrated? 1, 2, 3. Second generation. Okay, there's a vast difference between first generation and second generation immigrants. I can tell from my kids who are now 28 and 25, and they were born in India, but they got here relatively early. So, they have that advantage. So moving over to the United States when you're 35, when I got out of the airplane in San Francisco, the first thing I did was to bump into a glass door. It was so clean, I didn't know that there was a door there. Back in India, we didn't have too many glass doors. Even if we had glass doors, they were so dirty, you can easily make it out. No offense to Indians back there, but that's how I started in the United States. So I came here with my wife and a son who was 5 years old and a daughter who was 2 years old and $1,800 in my pocket. In March of 1992, I was in San Francisco, knew no one, literally knew no one. I crashed into some kind of a forced friendship that I created over the previous 3 days or so. That gentleman put us up for 30 days in Concord. And then my wife, who is a nurse, found a job in Sonoma. We moved to Sonoma. And her path was clear because she's a registered nurse. She takes the exam and her path was set. What am I going to do? Back there in India, I was with a nationalized bank and then with Federal Reserve Bank of India and all that good stuff. But that amounts to nothing. So I had to start from fresh. And I have 2 kids for babysitting. If I make $5, I don't have enough to pay for the babysitting. So the thing that I figured out was to do night work and then take care of the babies during the daytime. The first job I got was in Marin. That's how my professional life in Marin began. As a shelving assistant at Novato, Target. That's where I reported at 5 o'clock. And if you're lucky, it'll go up to 9 o'clock. Meaning, they'll send you home if there is not enough work. So we were all sweating, hey, keep us for another 6 hours or whatever. That's where I started. Then on to USPS Postal Service for 2 years in Petaluma. Again, night duty so that I can take care of my kids during the day. I went to Sonoma State and 6 units. 3 units in accounting and 3 units in auditing so that I can be eligible to take the CPA exam, which I did. And for some strange reason, I passed all 4 parts in one sitting, and I got a nice gold embossed letter from the whatever state agency who was administering that. And then that itself won't get you a job in 92. I just passed the CPA exam, no one would even touch you. So I started the usual round. I applied for an account clerk 2 position at the County of Sonoma. And this is strange that we are sharing the same stage. My account clerk 2 position was at the Superior Court of Sonoma County. I never thought a day would come where I would share the dais with the Executive Director for Marin Superior Court. So I'll cut it short. Account clerk 2, account clerk 3, accountant, administrative services officer 1, all in about 3 years. And I landed as the CFO of the Sonoma County Water Agency in about 3 years, 98. And then 6 years at that position. And then 8 years at the Valley of the Moon Water District as the general manager. And I don't know how I landed here in Marin as the Marin Municipal's 9th general manager in 100 years. I think I'm the first Asian general manager. That's my long story.
Thank you. James, you started talking to us about how you became a public servant. What are the biggest rewards and challenges in being a public servant?
I'll start with sort of the challenges. I think based on my background, it's you want to help everybody. And it's, I think, difficult at times for the court because we have a certain demographic that comes to the court. But I do want to share a story because I think it sort of describes my own sort of philosophies on public service. And you'll find that I talk in stories, so let me know if the story becomes boring. But so it was, I think, my first week here in the Civic Center, and the former CEO told me you should be here no later than 8:30. So I was sort of getting my own self that I'm going to be here at 8:30, I'm going to be here at 8:30. I come in, it's 8:25, so I have 5 minutes to spare. And I see this woman sort of coming up, you come in through the elevator, and she's sort of just wandering around. And because I'm new and I'm sort of wondering too, I go up to her and she's like, I'm trying to find the library. And I'm like, oh, I've heard there's a library in this building. And she's like, yeah, I've heard it's in this building, it's in the Civic Center. And I'm like, yes, I'll help you find it because I want to help. And so we spend a good 35 minutes looking for this library. So I'm thinking it's got to be on the 3rd floor. I know there is a 3rd floor to this building. And so we're walking around the 3rd floor, we do a sweep of the 2nd floor, we do the sweep of the 1st floor, and this poor woman I'm sort of dragging around as I'm, sort of fumbling through directions. And unfortunately, I'm sort of embarrassed to say this because it's actually, there's an elevator that I've been told that goes directly to the library. We didn't find the library. And the reason why I'm sharing that story is that's been my sort of experience in public service. There are times where we start with the best intentions, and we want to help everyone that we run into, and the energy and the mentality is there to help. Sometimes we're able to help, and sometimes we're not able to help. And I think some of the biggest challenges are when we're not able to help. Another quick story I have is when I've started to get to know community groups, and when they talk to me, they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I'm the CEO of the court. And they're like, well, what's a CEO of a court? And most people don't recognize that. I think there's an administrative branch. They know Matthew and they know his administration. But in terms of, there's a lot of, I think, perceptions out there in the public that there isn't an administrative part. And as many administrative organizations go, some of the challenges that face the court face a lot of the organizations in our community, where we have to be budget friendly, we have to be budget driven, we have to be fiscally accountable. We also report to the state. So I think the challenges are really running an organization that meets sort of the needs of our local communities, but then also sort of deals with some of the statewide type challenges that we're dealing with in the courts. But I think overall I've been completely impressed. If you do know, like if you ever find you need to send anyone to find the library, I've become really an expert at it, actually know now the quickest way to get there. But in that sense, those have been sort of the both the joys and some of the challenges I face in my current position.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you. I want to do an obligation which I failed to do. There is an ex-boss in the audience, my ex-boss, Lisa Cross, who was on my board, and she was my boss for 2 years. Nice to see you, Lisa, back there. Back to the question of public service. For some strange reason, I've been an employee for 35 years now, 1980, 36 years. All 36 years, but for the 35 days I spent at Novato Target, I was a public servant, strangely enough. So my kids would make fun of me. You were a government servant back in India. What forced you to choose the same career here? I wasn't consciously thinking. I grabbed the first thing that came my way. But all my life, I've been in government service. But the one thing that struck with me about this service is the myriad ways in which you influence an average citizen's life. No one ever kind of understands that part of it. You could be the Coca-Cola chairman, but to enroll someone for the elections, you need to be at the elections office. When we touch people's lives in so many ways. One quick example, back in India, I was with the Federal Reserve, and about 5 or 6 of us were chosen and sent to the United States to learn all about ACH, Automated Clearinghouse Operations, which was non-existent in India at that time. So we learned it here and introduced ACH for the first time for about 1 billion Indians. And where do you get that kind of unique opportunity? And here at MMWD, we take it very lightly, but making sure there is reliable, safe drinking water. For the last 100 years, people took care of it. How do we ensure it for the next 100 years? That is profound. I mean, those opportunities are only available in public sector.
Just FYI, there is a directory.
No.
I know, it's cool, it's cool. I'm not judging.
Well, I've also learned that there used to be a gift shop
I know, right?
that is no longer here that I also try to help somebody find, and yeah, so.
Shameless plug though, how many of you have ever taken the history docent tour of the Marin Civic Center for the Frank Lloyd Wright Building? 5 of you? Shame on all of you. You should take it. It's exciting. No, don't shake your head, Brent Ainsworth. I think it's fantastic. Right? But tying back into this, both of you touched upon your roles being Asian American, and more so with you, James, you expounded about it in talking about your childhood. How has Asian American affected your life as a public servant, or your career, or the way you influence others?
So again, I'll sort of briefly talk in stories. One of the, I think, and I was contemplating on whether or not to bring it, and my wife said don't, because they're always going to remember you from this picture. There is a picture of myself as I think I was 7 at the time, where I have this huge perm. It's like, you know, it's a 4 to 5 inch perm. And my sister is right next to me, and my sister has straight hair. So you're wondering, what were my parents thinking where they give their son this 3 inch perm, and the daughter has straight hair, and she's, to this day, my sister, I don't think has had a perm. And it sums up, I think, growing up Asian American, and as Krishna mentioned, there is a difference between first and second generations. I am what is known as a second generation Asian American that was born here in the United States. But there was that conflict going on as a kid. The reason why I ended up getting the perm is there's something known as Korean pop these days, or it's Korean pop music. And at the time, my mother was very into leaving her culture behind, so she was hungry for a lot of the pop culture that was coming out of Asia. And at the time, a lot of the male singers and actors had this perm. And the reason why I share it as an example is you can imagine as a young kid going to school, this Asian kid who was sort of chubby with this huge perm, and people feeling like, what is this kid really about? And so I think growing up Asian American was, I always had both cultures at play. I had the Asian culture at home where my parents were very much Asian. I also had the American culture where a lot of my friends grew up in American families, they had American values. And so how I think that has bled into the way I lead, the way I view the world, and the way I've tried to lead administrations is that I am a practical example that diversity and differing views and thoughts, if you come with an open mind, work. It's basically my background. It's cultures that typically shouldn't work or have conflict have worked through me, and I've been able to reconcile a lot of the conflict. One of the things I think a lot of the affinity groups do really well here is, you mentioned food. It starts with food, and it's funny, it's irrespective of the type of food or the ingredients, and irrespective of where you come from, there's something that resonates in any culture around food. And I don't think that's by accident. I think that's very intentional. And so how I think my background has really helped me is that I had a very specific culture at home, a very specific culture when I was sort of out in the world. And I know, having grown up in both cultures, that when people with open minds meet together and share their points of views and cultures, some amazing things are able to happen. And so, again, I wanted to thank Maple because this shows me that it's actually alive and working in Marin. And the fact that the other affinity groups are here as well and sort of sharing their own stories, I think is pretty wonderful and amazing. So thank you.
I'd just like to point out the connoisseur of food trucks mentions food.
My turn?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just saw Matthew sitting in the audience. Can I shamelessly make a statement with your indulgence, Matthew? You have the brightest, smartest, and the most capable CEO this side of the Mississippi, only because I don't know anything about the other side of the Mississippi. Seriously, you should be really, really honored and be proud to have Matthew on your side. Okay, back to the question, how has my Asian, or what are my Asian influences? I called my daughter, who is doing her master's in Denver University. I said, that's one of the pesky questions. I am a little clueless. So could you help me? And so her response is what I wanted to share with you. She said, Dad, you're always a no label kind of a person. You don't fit into, that's their take. And she said, what aspect of you has not been influenced by your upbringing in Asia, including the way you murder the English words and your own screwy accent? Start right there. You are who you are. I mean, you just cannot hide the fact that I spent 35 years in India, whether you like it or not. And also I have a contrarian theory on heritages. It's strange to say what is good with one culture, because I think I'm a humanist by definition. Every culture emphasizes the same aspects of the goodness in people, the kindness in people. I don't think any culture would deviate from that central primary premise. Having said that, I wanted to focus on just one aspect. I think that has influenced me by growing up in India, because in modest circumstances, what true hardship is. That's how I grew up. I got the sense of gratitude from those days. I was walking through this building. I took 3 extra rounds just to appreciate how beautiful the day is and how beautiful this building is. In our busy lives, we tend to forget all those bright stars and bright lines around us. I think that sense of gratitude, I always compulsorily look for that bright lining, and there are plenty. That's one thing I would attribute to my upbringing back in Asia.
No, keep that. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I know, 1 o'clock. Ralph, you didn't even have to cue him. At this time, if there are any questions from the audience at all? Crickets? Crickets? Well, how about this? How about one closing note or piece of advice from each of you? Who'd like to start? I can flip a coin. No? All right, James.
I think coming just new to the county, I've really appreciated everyone's openness and feedback. I think one of the things I've valued when we talk about diversity is that there's been no shortage of people coming up and willing to share their ideas and willing to sort of talk to us about what we can do. And so I think my invitation to everyone is if you do have any kind of feedback, comments, if there are better ways to sort of partner within the community, that the courts could partner, do let us know, because I think one of the things that we are trying to do a little bit differently is to really sort of get out into our communities. We are trying to, when I was originally approached by Otis actually to talk to the San Rafael Rotary Club, I first thought they probably don't want me to come and talk because I'm from the court. And I found that wasn't the case. I found that there were a lot of things that the courts could do within their communities where we could partner and actively work together. So I am looking for other opportunities where the court could leverage some community relationships. So if you have any ideas, we're more than welcome in hearing those out. So please do come and talk to me about those ideas. So thank you.
I'll make this short. I don't have any advice. You guys know better than I do, but I'll share one little story or my attitude and approach. I've been here 25 years, close to. So the question about discrimination or are you being treated differently, the question pops up. I want to make a bold statement. I've never ever been during these 25 years discriminated or looked upon in a different fashion. Never once. On the contrary, every time I run into, meaning this is a story of all immigrants. We are here because of the kindness of total strangers. And that's the honest truth. I'll tell you one specific example. This would be 96 when I applied for a position of the auditor trainee in Sonoma County. There was a panel of 3 people, the interview was over, and they granted me 100 out of 100, and later an insider at HR told me, panels never ever give 100%. And I think I was the first person to get 100%. So, I mean, that is where I draw my strength. You bring integrity, hard work, and your own skill sets. You are rewarded amply. I've never felt otherwise all 25 years. This may not be the same story with all of you, but I thought I would make that bold statement.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Can we give a applause for Marin?